Welcome to another episode of the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullrud. We are continuing our Inside Look series at the draft picks in the NFL Draft. This series is presented to you by StatRoute, your top source for fantasy football and now fantasy basketball stats. You can go to statroute.com, enter in the promo code SkullKingFF in order to get 25% off your monthly subscription. Again, in this episode, we are talking with the voice of the Marshall Thundering Herd, Mr. Stephen Cotton, about the wide receiver Tyre Brady. This is a really fun conversation we had about a wide receiver that has really come into his own the last couple of years, and I think is going to be one of the more underrated wide receivers in this draft. It'd be really interesting to see where he goes. So again, I hope you enjoy this episode as we talk about Tyre Brady from Marshall University. All right, well, for our next interview, we are going to be talking about a lanky wide receiver out of the University, or Marshall University, I believe. We are talking with the voice of Marshall's football team, Mr. Stephen Cotton. Steve, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Sure thing, Ryan. No problem.
All right, so Tyre Brady, 6'3", 206 pounds, had a very solid 2018 season, 71 catches, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Really, he had a solid year in 2017 as well. 62 catches, almost 950 yards, another 8 TDs. Really a solid wide receiver. Give us just kind of a little bit of your perspective on the career and especially this past season that Tyre has had.
Well, Tyre was a 2-year player for Marshall University, a transfer from the University of Miami. He's from South Florida, Homestead. Played for the Hurricanes for a couple of years, wanted a different opportunity, and thought and was right in thinking that he could get a lot of playing time at Marshall and be a key component here for the Thundering Herd. And he was just that. He sat out the 2016 season. Like you said, had a big year in 2017, burst onto the scene at a game at North Carolina State. How about this? Still a relatively unknown. You're about 3 games into the year. And he ends up at Carter Finley Stadium there at NC State, catching passes for 248 yards on 11 receptions, had a 75-yard touchdown catch that was maybe a 20-yard pass downfield. He made a move and then just ran away from the Wolfpack secondary. So 248 yards, a Carter Finley Stadium record, and that's a place where, and not just for visitors, that's for anybody, that's a place where guys like Torrey Holt and Jericho Cotchery played their entire careers. And so to hold that kind of a record says a lot about him. From that point on, he was certainly no surprise to anyone. And like you said, ended up with 950 yards and 8 touchdowns, but he missed virtually all of 3 games late in the season. He suffered an ankle injury it was very early in the game, and it might have even been the first play from scrimmage against Western Kentucky. Missed the next 2 games totally after missing the rest of that one. And Marshall lost both of those games by 2 points and by 1 point. Probably a team that went 8-5 on the year might have been 10-3 if he stayed healthy. So a huge part of the team, and again, decided to return to Marshall for a senior season, even though some of the pro scout types were saying, yeah, you'll get your chance if you go to the NFL. Wanted to come back and show that was no fluke, and had a good season again here as a senior. So really, and a kind of a team first kind of guy, was injured, like I said, at the end of his junior season, missed the last 3 games, almost of the regular season, came back, wanted to play in the bowl game, even though people are telling him about his NFL future. Had a huge game. Marshall beat Colorado State at the New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque. Had a 76-yard touchdown catch, caught passes for 175 yards in that game. And then at the end of this year, it's a kind of a thing where a lot of guys who are looking at their pro career sit out a bowl game. Well, he said no way he was going to play. Marshall beat South Florida at the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa this time around, and he was a big part of that too. So a guy who really loves the game, a good team-first guy, and he was going to be out there and play with his brothers, as he called them, every opportunity that he had.
Yeah, watching some of his game tape. I watched some of the tape from that North Carolina State game. Just phenomenal. His ability to get open, his ability to pull away from defenders once he has the ball in his hand. His hands, though. I mean, his ability to focus and be able to catch the ball in contested areas when he's got one or two guys on him. His hand strength is, I think, the thing that popped out to me the most when it comes to watching Tyre Brady.
Yeah, and that I noticed early when he was sitting out as a transfer in 2016. Two things are in my mind firmly from that season: his hands and how he would. And this went on throughout his career, but I noticed it first that year he was sitting out. The last guy to leave the field, he's working with the jugs gun and extra work on that, and can catch with just his hands, and it seems like just his fingers, and sometimes. And also that year, Marshall played Louisville, and he was the scout team version of Lamar Jackson, and so did a pretty presentable job of it, and just the way he could run. So I said, okay, this guy, a year from now, when he gets his chance in 2017, has an opportunity because he's going to work as hard as he possibly can, and he's got the hands, and also he can run around and make things happen after the ball's in his hand. So I thought there was potential for some good things at that point. And then, like you say, probably when 10 years from now I think back on Tyre Brady, the plays that are going to be in my mind are him going up one-on-one, winning the battle with competitive spirit, fighting for the ball, and often right on the sideline and having the awareness and the ability to get his feet down in bounds. That's the way he made a lot of his big catches and helped Marshall win several football games the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next point, was his footwork around the sidelines, his ability to get a foot down. I saw a couple times where he, even though it's the college game, you only need one, where you could tell he focused and made sure he got 2 feet down before going out of bounds. His attention to where his feet are at the sideline, again, along with his ability to catch the ball in contested areas, just a phenomenal talent in terms of his awareness of where he's at with his body, with his feet, where to have his hands in order to make sure that he's the one that comes down with the ball.
He did it time and time again, and did it, and especially his senior season, because Marshall lost the quarterback the previous year, went pro early, Chase Litton. He's with the Kansas City Chiefs, and kind of unexpectedly tossed a freshman into the job as a starting quarterback, and a guy named Isaiah Green, who is very good, but is not, or was not, I should say, as accurate as he will be later in his career. Again, Marshall was planning on him being kind of the backup to Litton last year and wanted to have him ready to be the starting quarterback in this season coming up. So Tyre, number one, was the focus of the defense. So he was often double-teamed, bracketed, whatever the defense wanted to do. And then also often had to make a catch, make a play, adjust to a ball that might not have been the most accurate in the world. So, and all the while, often it's on the sideline. And he's then, after he does all that and gets the ball in his hands, he's got to figure out how to complete the play and get down inbound. So, yeah, that's impressive. That whole package of him when he's covered, and often there might be 2 defenders there. If he's over the middle, he's battling a couple of guys for it, and able to do all of those things and still make something positive happen, and even when he's such a focus of the defense and maybe the ball wasn't thrown exactly where it made it the easiest for him, and he still came through time and time again and made the plays.
Yeah, one of the things I think that really helps him, especially when he's being bracketed, double covered, is at the point of the snap, his quick feet at the line of scrimmage to try to put himself in a position to get open. Is another thing that kind of stepped out to me. His ability to really be quick For a guy his size. I mean, yeah, he has the speed, once he catches the ball, but just the quickness in the very beginning of the play to be able to move himself to get into a spot to go and get open, I think is another thing that really stood out to me.
Yeah, it is. And he's a guy who faced the other team's number one cornerback all the time. He was Marshall's guy. They knew it, and the game plan was to make sure Tyre Brady didn't have a huge afternoon or evening against that team. So they would sometimes try to jam him on the line of scrimmage, and it didn't seem to work very often. And I wouldn't say that Tyre's strength, and it certainly his upper body strength, is going to jump out when you're talking about the next level at the NFL. He's probably average in that, and yet even the physical cornerbacks were not able to just tie him up on the line of scrimmage. He was able to get himself open and make himself a target for, again, quarterbacks that were trying to themselves learn the game. And especially early in the season, he was the security blanket. So there were a lot of footballs thrown his direction, and it wasn't surprising anybody. There was a little more variance in the offense later in the year as the young quarterback grew up a little bit. But that was, and specifically there was a game against Western Kentucky early in the season. I think it was late September. He's still the guy, and most of the targets most of the throws are heading his direction in key situations. Marshall's down at the end of the game with under 2 minutes left, 17-13. So Marshall has to have a touchdown. And I believe it was a 32-yard touchdown pass when the entire Western Kentucky defense is thinking about Tyre Brady on that play. And he released and found an open spot, caught the pass, kind of a slant, maybe 10 yards downfield, and then had a couple of shimmies and shakes and a wiggle here and went through and weaved his way through two or three defenders and made it to the end zone to win the game. So that probably that one play, even more than running away from NC State or Colorado State players who are in the NFL now, might have been the play that showed the most of what he could do in terms of his career at Marshall.
All right. The one that you mentioned, his upper body strength. I think that was, again, that's the one thing in a lot of the analysis of Tyre Brady is the one thing that if there's something that he could work on is his upper body strength, just to help him, again, especially with physical corners in the NFL. I wanted to ask one last question about him, just in overall his general route running ability, his ability to kind of double move and move into cuts and everything. Just if you could make just a quick comment on that real quick.
Well, I think that, again, that's probably it was good in terms of being a college football player, but those are the kind of things, unless you're the supremely talented, and you think at Marshall University, Randy Moss is what comes into mind. Unless you're at that level, you've got to do all the little things right. If you're going to be, what most people say is probably a mid-round draft pick. Maybe he can raise that stock a little bit by performing well at the combine. But that attention to detail and getting that exactly right is what's going to make the difference for him. Now, the good thing about that is, like I said earlier, he's going to be the first one out of practice and the last one to leave to make sure he gets done what he needs to prolong his career and make sure that he becomes an important part of whatever team ends up drafting him.
All righty. Well, again, Steve, we want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us about Tyre Brady. Again, I'm very interested to see where he goes. As we've done some of these interviews over the last couple of years, it's been cool to get to know some of these players from again the guys that cover them and kind of see how their careers develop. And it's for me, it's very exciting to see what Tyre Brady could possibly do in the NFL, especially depending on what kind of system he gets in. So,
well, Ryan, no problem. Appreciate it. And like I say, he's a guy who has the want to. He has the work ethic, and he's a pretty skilled guy to start with. So I like his chances.
All right, thank you so much, Steve, and maybe we'll give you another call again next year if we've got another player that's looking to come out into the draft.
Sounds good, Ryan.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Hey, SkullKing Nation, thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.